Good Monday. This is Jay Brew, co-chairman of Seifried and Brew. S&B just released our top 15th percentile for 2012 of community banks. You can go and access the top 15th percentile banks on our website and look at that list of great performance in here. Because when we look at the top 15th percentile, it's not just a reward type list that you see from other places. It's really that balance of risk and reward that creates in our mind the top banks in the country. So what are some of the attributes of these banks? Have they really changed from previous top 15th percentile? No, but I think it's still worthwhile to go over if you are in the top 15th percentile, why are you there? And strategically, if you want to get to the top 15th percentile, what do you do in here? Well, one thing you don't do is to take a lot of risk as a member of the top 15th percentile. For instance, on the median, risk for the top 15th percentile is a ranking of 37.83 compared to 48.34 for all community banks nationally. This is what I always sit there and say, is that it sort of goes against what they teach you in school, that you can take a lower level of risk in community banking and get a higher level of reward. Because when we look at the overall reward scores, for instance, on a national basis, we're looking at 37.61 ranking. Well, look at that top 15th percentile in here being at 68.54, so very high performing. We look at, well, what are the key marks of that kind of performance in here? Well, if you look at it on an ROA basis, is that on ROAs on the top 15th percentile, 1.25% versus 0.58% for the national. When we look at that, is that the sound earnings that you see in the ROA continue to propel the top 15th percentile into that high performance type category. Well, what I always look at first is let's look at cash type deposits, those checking and savings. What do the top 15th percentile do compared to the national average? Well, the national average in here at 61%. Looking at the top 15th percentile at 64%. So once again, they have more of the cheaper type deposits overall. When we look at then how do they make money, well, you look at it from a net interest margin standpoint. Net interest margin in here for the top 15th percentile, 4.02% versus the national average in here at a 3.72%. Once again, on both sides, they have higher yield on earning assets as well as they have a lower cost of deposits due to those cash type deposits. The other factor in here, which we've talked about this year as being a strategic initiative, is that net overhead, the difference between non-interest income and non-interest expense. When we look at net overhead, for instance, 1.73 for the top 15th percentile versus an overall 2.40 for the national median. So when we think about that, that's a huge difference that adds to a lot of profitability. And there needs to be control overall in this area. And that's why we put it as a strategic initiative for all community banks to bring that overall level of net overhead down when there's pressures this year in terms of the overall net interest margin. So we look at these different factors in the top 15th percentile. And I send out my congratulations to all of those banks on that list. It's not something that you get up into one year and then it drops off the next year. The list remains steady of strong, traditional conservative community banks. This is Jay Brew, co-chairman of Seifried and Brew. Have a great week.